Hello, my name is Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth. Hearing my name probably doesn't mean much, but I'm here to tell you my story. I was born March 18, 1922 in Mount Meigs, Alabama. I was born into a large family and my original last name was Robinson, but I took the surname of Shuttlesworth from my stepfather William, who married my mother Alberta. In 1925, we moved from that rural area to the bustling city of Birmingham. In Birmingham, I attended school, and in 1940, I graduated valedictorian of my class from Rosedale High. A year after graduating, I met my first wife, Ruby. We had 4 children together, but we got divorced. But that's another story for another day. I worked many jobs, and I would take any that I could find. But through all these jobs I had, none of them I actually enjoyed. Then in 1943, preaching was my calling, and I began preaching and decided to attend Cedar Grove Academy Bible College in Pritchard, Alabama. After my schooling and a rigorous religious journey, I became the pastor for the First Baptist Church in Selma in 1949. The schooling I received I was thankful for, but I still wanted more. So I enrolled at Selma University. 3 years later, in 1951, I graduated from the ministerial institution. Religion and knowledge was something I was passionate about, and I went on to enroll at Alabama State College, where I graduated in 1952 with a bachelor's degree. My time at the First Baptist Church of Selma came to an end when I began preaching at Bethel Baptist Church in Collegeville, Alabama in 1953. All around me, racial injustices were being committed, and I wanted to get involved. So, in 1955, I petitioned the Birmingham City Commission to hire black police officers. I issued a statement that was endorsed by many ministers, and I led a delegation to City Hall. It was a small step, but I knew after that I couldn't quit now. The African Americans of the South needed my help. A year later, on June 5th, I preached at Sardis Baptist Church in Birmingham on the night I started the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights. And you know what? A short week later, that Alabama Attorney General John Patterson had the nerve to outlaw the NAACP. But that night, the energy of the church was rising, and no seat was empty. What he didn't know was my emotions were so riled that I screamed my sermon, and that whole church was behind me. This was the start of something great. My year in 1956 started my heavy involvement in the civil rights movement. That year I accompanied Authrine Lucy in her attempt to become the first black student to attend the University of Alabama in February. Then in December, the Ku Klux Klan bombed the church where I slept, but somehow I survived. That was a miracle, and by the grace of God, I knew that I had to keep going. On Valentine's Day of 1957, I founded the SCLC, or as you may know it, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, along with Dr. King, Reverend Ralph David Abernathy, and many other ministers. I began to establish a name in the civil rights community, and it felt great. This is the start of my long journey with the SCLC. Later in September, I attempted to enroll my daughters into an all-white high school, and I was beaten by a mob. I was not going to give up, though. Even when they bombed my church a year later, I was not going to accept any defeat. On April 19th of 1960, I was sued for libel, along with the New York Times. I spoke out against Sullivan versus New York Times case, but later in March of 1964, the ruling was reversed, and I will have helped to create a landmark free speech case. The real stuff came when in 1962, I met with Attorney General Kennedy and Vice President Lyndon Johnson in Washington. I went with Dr. King and many others to ask for a second Emancipation Proclamation to end segregation once and for all. To start 1965 off right, I helped to kick off a voter registration drive in Selma with Dr. King, Ralph Abernathy, and Reverend Andrew Young. It was January 18th to be exact. Later that year, I went on to speak with Malcolm X and joined Dr. King in prayer across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Let's skip ahead. Some years later, in 2003, when I was named the interim president for the SCLC, and then in 2004, I resigned because the organization had allowed deceit and mistrust to enter through its doors. In October of 2011, I died after extended illness, but as you can see, my life was well lived. My contributions to the civil rights movement included the various things I did on my own, my preaching, and my role in founding the SCLC. I kept the civil rights movement alive long after it had ended and continued to educate people on the horrors of racism into my old age. The SCLC is the main impact I had on the civil rights movement. My role in creating and sustaining that organization is the legacy that I leave behind today.